All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar on international student and scholar rights. My name is Ron Cushing. I'm Director of UC International Services, and I'll be running the webinar this afternoon. We have put this webinar together because of all of the changes that have gone into effect since the Trump administration took office in January. So he's issued a lot of executive orders, in fact, well over 50 of them. Some of them reference specifically non-immigrants, people on visas, and there's been a lot of discussion among students and scholars about how these executive orders affect them, what they should be doing, things that they've been worrying about. And so we are going to try to cover all of those things this afternoon. We'll talk about the orders that specifically have language that reference international students and scholars and what we think is coming, as well as touch on your constitutional rights being in this country and how these orders may affect you. Now, one of the first things I want to start off with, though, is just an overview of who is considered an international student and scholar at the university, because a lot of the things are written specifically for non-immigrants and visa holders and individuals who don't hold any legal status at all. So at the university, basically, you are considered a U.S. or domestic student or scholar if you are a U.S. citizen, a permanent resident, a refugee, or asylee. And so anybody else here for any other reason, we consider to be international, and you can certainly be affected by many of these executive orders. In fact, even if you hold a green card, for example, you might be affected by some of these executive orders. But regardless of your immigration status, and I realize most of you on this call will likely be F1 or J1 international students or scholars, but there's a lot of other statuses out there that you might be on. You may be in transition to obtain things like permanent residence or refugee or asylee status, and you may be completely undocumented as well. But unless you are a citizen, permanent resident, refugee, or asylee, we consider you to be international. Now, one of the big questions is there's a lot that's been publicized about ongoing raids by ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and people being detained. And is there a requirement or necessity to carry around all of your legal documents with you, your passport, your visa stamp, your I-94 card? Since the Immigration and Nationality Act was implemented way back in the 1950s, it had a provision that says if you're over 18, you should be carrying your documentation of legal status with you. However, I've been doing this job for 30 plus years, and there has never been a reason why anyone who wasn't traveling needed to carry their passport with them at all times. But in the current environment, there is concern that if you're someplace and they may be conducting a raid that has nothing to do with you, but you're in the vicinity and somebody says, hey, show me your legal documents, should you be carrying around your legal documents? And we're not going to tell you you should or shouldn't, but you may want to consider making sure you have with you either paper copies or photos on your phone, documentation of your status. And the most common identification document you're going to have is your passport, your biography page that shows your picture, who you are, where you were born, all those kinds of things. If you're in the country on a student visa, you're going to have an I-20 form or a DS 2019. You should carry that. You may have work permits or I-797 notices, those kinds of things that you want to carry. If you're on OPT, you might have your OPT work permit. Your I-94 card is something that's issued electronically, and you can download from the DHS website for I-94 cards. And so it's something you may want to consider, making sure you have copies with you or on your phone, just in case law enforcement asks you about your status. Now, let's talk a little bit about protections for international students and scholars. And the U.S. Constitution guarantees rights for anybody in the U.S., including those who are here on visas, and even in some cases, those who have no legal status. There are certain things the Constitution, prohibits based on citizenship, things like the ability to run for federal office, the ability to vote. But in most cases, any right that a U.S. born citizen has while you're in the U.S., you are going to be able to take, advantage of that as well, especially if you are maintaining a legal status. If you are undocumented or not maintaining a legal status, you're always at risk that certain First Amendment rights will not apply to you. Now, within our international population here, without question, our biggest population are F1 students and J1 students and scholars. And so you are treated a little bit differently because you are in a tracking and monitoring system called the Student and Exchange Visitor Information System, or SEVIS. UC is required by law to report things on your status, whether you're enrolled properly, signing documents for travel, authorizing work authorization for things like optional or curricular practical training, what's your address and phone number, what classes are you taking, all of those kinds of things we have to report. It is very important that if you're on an F1 or J1 status and in the SEVIS system, that you follow all the rules for maintaining that status. Because if you don't, and we have to terminate your active status in SEVIS, that's going to notify the government that you are here basically without a legal status. Now, we're not going to cover all the things you have to do as an F1 or J1 to maintain your status here. If you're not clear on those things, make sure you go to our website and you read all the documentation about maintaining your valid F1 or J1 status. But there are some things about SEVIS that we want you to know. So first is that staff in UC International are the only authorized users of the SEVIS system at UC, nobody else. We have what are called designated school officials, and we are the ones who take action on your SEVIS record. And action, other than the regular reporting we have to do saying you're enrolled or you're authorized to work, the only time action is taken on your record is if you're dismissed or you violate your status. Law enforcement agencies cannot take action on your SEVIS record. Only our office can. Now, one of the things I want to stress about that is if you maintain your status, you really have no reason to be overly concerned. Nobody's going to come looking for you if you're maintaining your status. But at the point that we have to push a button and terminate your status, then somebody potentially could come looking for you. So maintain your status as an F1 or J1. Next, I want to talk a little bit about your legal rights. So if you don't maintain status, for example, and immigration and custom enforcement or other law enforcement officers come to visit you at home, on the street, at your job, or any place else, we want you to know that you do have rights. And the first right is you have the right to remain silent. So you can refuse to speak to immigration officers or request your legal representation, an attorney to be with you. You do not have to open your door to ICE unless they show you a warrant signed by a judge. So if somebody just comes to your house and says, I'm an immigration agent, you need to say first, show me your identification and your badge. And if you want to, you can say, show me your warrant to enter my domicile, if that's in fact what they want to do. You always have the right to speak to a lawyer, and all you need to simply say is, I need to speak to my attorney, and they will have to let you get one. Now, you can have your lawyer with you if ICE or other law enforcement questions you. Now, in some cases, ICE officials have been known to try to get you to sign away your rights to those kinds of things. And, you need to make sure that if they present something for you to sign, giving away your rights, that you understand what the document actually says before you sign it. And again, you can ask for your lawyer when necessary. Now, a lot of students have recently inquired about the right to protest. So there's a lot going on in the world right now, both internationally, federally, and within the state. And, students have asked about their right to protest. And the Constitution provides everyone in the U.S. with certain freedoms. And one of those freedoms is the right to demonstrate peacefully, to advocate for issues that matter to you. And you should know, though, that at least one new executive order does have language that directs the government to look at visa applicants, those present in the U.S., who bear what they call hostile attitudes towards U.S. policy or support. They're going to start to consider those individuals threats to the United States. So you do want to be mindful of where you're going to protest, what you're going to protest, and how you publicize your participation in those types of things, knowing what the government is going to be looking for. But for sure, any peaceful public protest, you are more than welcome to join in. Just make sure you're aware of things like curfews wherever you might be joining those things. Make sure that it is a public space and not a private space where you're going there would be infringing upon, some legal rights. A few months ago, there were lots of protests regarding, the whole Palestinian and Israeli war issues. And in some cases, some of the protests were going to private offices and taking those over. You need to be aware of where you're going and what you're doing. Do not get involved in anything that involves destruction of property, theft, or other illegal activities. Even innocent violations of law could have serious consequences to your immigration status with your participating, but you are certainly allowed to participate in peaceful public protests. One question, and we've been getting a lot of questions about, is will ICE come to campus? So under the previous administration, universities were one of many entities that were deemed to be protected areas against enforcement activities by ICE. And on January 21st, the Trump administration rescinded that guidance. And so that means if they want to, they can certainly come to campus and make unannounced visits. Students are concerned about that. I've been doing this 30 years, and ICE has never come to our campus, unannounced to try to conduct any kind of investigations or raids. And we certainly don't expect them to be doing that in the near future. But you do need to understand that if they do come to campus and they have, valid warrants and subpoenas, the university will have to comply with those warrants and subpoenas. But we will, to the extent possible, always protect your rights and the FERPA laws that are here to protect you. Now, one of the executive orders titled Protecting the United States from Foreign Terrorists and Other National Security and Public Threats is one that everybody needs to be aware of, because basically that's going to enhance and tighten vetting of all visa applicants, whether it's at an embassy overseas, you're in the country trying to apply for a benefit like practical training or a change of status. Everybody needs to understand that in the current environment, things are going to take longer. If you go home and your visa is expired, it's likely going to take you a longer period of time to get a visa appointment scheduled. If you're applying for things like OPT, apply as early as possible, because you should expect longer processing times in the coming future. So, that's just a reality of that particular executive order. So apply early for things is our best advice. Now, when it comes to resources that students need to know about, one of the best places to get more information on things like your rights that we talked a little bit about and those kinds of things is the National Immigration Law Center. They have lots and lots of resources for immigrants about knowing your rights on topics like your ability to engage in protest, understanding warrants and subpoenas, what to do if you're arrested, and all of those kinds of things. So you might want to bookmark the National Immigration Law Center and take a look at some of their resources. Another good resource is the American Civil Liberties Union, the ACLU. They have a well-developed site that discusses rights for those who are present in the U.S. as well. Now, one of the big questions we've been getting the last month or so from students is, if I do get in trouble for whatever reason, where do I go to get an attorney? If you are having an immigration issue, you need to have an immigration lawyer represent you. The university can't represent you. And the best place to look for those lawyers is the American Immigration Lawyers Association, AILA. That's a good resource for those who need legal advice. Our office cannot give you legal advice on many things. Now, what we can give you advice on is your current status, especially those of you who are F1 and J1 and in the SEVIS system, and also information about studying and living in the US. And so certainly use our website as a resource. You can call our office at 513-556-4278, and you can stop by in person. We have an advisor of the day on duty from 8 to 5 every day, Monday through Friday. 7148 Edwards Center 1 is where our office is located. I do want to stress that all the information we're providing today is not legal advice. It's only meant to be informational. Students and scholars are ultimately responsible for maintaining proper legal status, and when necessary, consulting an immigration attorney if you have serious legal questions.